News for sponsoring this event. I'd like to thank Dr. Deasy and our Galatzan for coming, and we run a really good, orderly, well-maintained school here, so we would expect a really good, orderly, well-maintained event here tonight. And I'd just like to welcome everybody here again and thank the Unified for coming out here and Mark's office. So without further ado, we'll give it over to the Daily News and they'll start the evening.
Hi everyone, good evening. I'm Jack Plunder, the publisher of the Daily News, and about a year ago we launched a series of town hall meetings, and education was going to be the second subject that we covered after we covered the mayor. And I'm sure many of you attended that event, but welcome this evening, and thank you to everyone for hosting this event with us. A couple of people I want to introduce before we get into the program. The editor of the Daily News, Carolina Garcia, and the editor of our editorial pages, Mario Garza. And then we also have former prosecutor and radio host Kevin James, mayor candidate for the city of Los Angeles. And on behalf of everyone at the Daily News, we want to pass along our condolences to the family of Francisco Rodriguez Jr. And a very tragic event impacted the school in a big way. So just let everybody know we're thinking about him. So at this point, I want to introduce the moderator for this evening. We'll get right into the program. It's a name you're very familiar with. He handles the morning drive time slot for KBC Talk Radio. He's back into his normal time slot now, so we're all happy about that. But more importantly, he's a columnist on the front page of the Daily News on Wednesdays and Sundays. Please welcome Mr. Doug McIntyre.
Good evening, everybody. Thanks so much for coming. Appreciate it very much. And I want to thank Principal Fady for having us here tonight. It's a little uncommon for me to be in the theater as opposed to in a folding chair outside the principal's office, waiting for my dad to come and get me. Anyway, I have some, the LAUSD brings out great passion. I know there's a lot of passion in the room, and we love the fact that so many Angelinos are committed and passionate about their children's future and the future of the city and the country, really. And I was digging through a quote. I knew I could find it somewhere. Back in 1785, John Adams, our second president and one of the giants of American history, said, and I quote, "The whole people must take upon themselves the education of the whole people and be willing to bear the expenses of it. There should not be a district of 1 mile square without a school in it, not founded by a charitable individual, but maintained at the public expense of the people themselves." That's John Adams a long, long time ago. And the reason he felt so passionately about it is he understood that a self-governing people have to be educated, that we the people have to have the facts and the ability to process information in order to make decisions for our own lives, our children's lives, and the future of our country. And that's why I think people understand intuitively how important and how high the stakes are for the LAUSD, the nation's second largest public school system. And if LA fails, America fails, and the world is worse for it. And that's why everything that we do here is so important, and we really appreciate, on behalf of the Daily News and the LAUSD, everybody coming out tonight, whatever your point of view is. So with that said, let's get to the main event, which is to welcome, first thing, if you could please shut off your cell phone so that we don't have those beepers going off, unless you're a doctor, and specifically unless you're my doctor. The other thing is, we have index cards that are available. Some of you are a little mic shy, and not a problem I have, but if you're a little mic shy, write your questions down. We'll collect those cards and we'll fold them in along with the questions from anybody who wants to come to the microphone. So there's a couple of different ways that you can submit your questions. Let's get to it. We're going to ask a few questions in the beginning from the LA Daily News that I'll be asking, and then as quickly as possible, we'll get to your questions, and we want to get as many questions as possible and have this excellent opportunity for you to ask questions of our two esteemed guests. Let me introduce them now, if I may. We'll start with the superintendent of the Los Angeles Unified School District. John Deasy became superintendent in April of 2011. Previously, he served as deputy superintendent for LAUSD and deputy director of education for the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, where he led the national programmatic, I practiced that word all day, programmatic work on teacher effectiveness. And Dr. Deasy has also served as superintendent of schools in Prince George County, Maryland. Please welcome Dr. John Deasy. We also welcome a member of the Los Angeles Unified School Board, Tamar Galatzan. How'd I do? I didn't do right, and I practice all week. Galatzan. Let's all do it together. Galatzan. Tamar is a criminal prosecutor, mother, and school board member representing District 3, which covers most of the San Fernando Valley, a graduate of Birmingham High School, and she is also the only member of the LAUSD School Board who actually has children in the Los Angeles Unified School District School, which is a pleasant change. So welcome, everybody. And let's get down to business.
Everybody can hear us, right? Okay, great. As I mentioned before, right at the top, a quote from John Adams. John Adams believed that public education was essential to forging a nation, to making that e pluribus unum possible. Dr. Deasy, can we start with you? What do you see as the mission statement of Los Angeles Unified School District? What's the purpose of LAUSD?
The purpose of LAUSD is to make sure that we provide the opportunity for every single student to graduate college or postgrad.
Can't hear you back here. Here we go.
Get on the mic.
There we go.
So the purpose of LAUSD is very simply, it is to make sure that every single student graduates college workforce ready. Every single student has a right to graduate from school ready and prepared for post-secondary if they choose that, or the world of work if they choose that as well. Not some, not most, but every single student. And our mission is to make sure that takes place in an environment where students have access to a highly effective teacher every year, in a school run by a very effective principal that is safe.
Tamar, same question. What do you see as the mission statement, the purpose of the LAUSD?
Well, I agree with the superintendent. If you delve a little bit more into that, when we talk about what the public, what the mission is of public education, education we always think of teaching kids to read and to write and to do math. But I also think it goes much deeper, and I think that's why some of the budget cuts that we're dealing with are so distressing to us. It's more than that. It's instilling in kids a love of learning, a curiosity, equipping them with the ability to discern right from wrong and kind of question authority and question what they're learning, and really to become lifelong learners. And I think that's a big piece of what we do also, and I think that's really what's at stake right now with this emphasis on test, and really a lack of emphasis of some of the other things that really make a complete person.
Public schools have an advantage and a disadvantage over private schools. Private schools can control enrollment. Public schools accept whatever students show up in the beginning of the school year. And with that said, in Los Angeles, with an incredibly diverse population, with at one point 96, maybe 100 languages spoken in the LAUSD, this presents a special challenge to create that e pluribus unum, though, the sort of the one community while respecting everybody's diversity. How do you see it, Superintendent Deasy? How do you see making that sort of community out of a district where 100 languages are spoken?
I think, first of all, I would say that it's a blessing to be able to have that kind of thing. I believe that in my heart.
Speaking to the mic, please.
So why don't you get one that actually this doesn't.
Can't hear you.
Try this one. Try this one. This one seems to be better.
Here's the mic. It works.
So that one works much better.
Better. Thank you.
So it is a blessing to have that kind of diversity in Los Angeles. I often say that LA is America, only sooner. This is what this country looks like. These are the challenges of this country. And your comment was actually not far from what I consider to be the exact truth. If it works in LA, the nation will be vastly better off. Our economic recovery is going to come west to east in this, coming out of this Great Recession. And leading that in California is going to have to be Los Angeles. The diversity around that has its challenges and it has its opportunities. So you're right, we have hundreds of home languages spoken, and we have a whole variety of the homes that students come from. Students who don't have homes, students who are in group homes, students who are in traditional homes, and now many families sharing a single home, given the housing issues that we've seen in the last 4 or 5 years. So for example, if we take a look at language diversity first. So we provided funding from the federal government to work with students so that they can learn English and become proficient in English as their first language. And that all comes through Title II and Title III. That's how the money that we spend for that. We get about $190 million from the federal government each year to support language learners. And we have approximately 180,000 language learners of the 700,000 or so students. But it's not just one language, as you know. It is Korean, and it is Mandarin, and it is a whole host of Slavic languages, and it is a whole host of Middle Eastern languages and Spanish. And our goal is to work with students who come to us at whatever stage of proficiency to be able to, in the period of time that we like to look forward, which is 3 to 5 years in our schools, to be able to be redesignated and reclassified as language proficient. And we do that in a variety of ways. We do that through intensive work, and we do that through immersive work. And we are successful at doing that tremendously if the students stay with us. And we struggle at being successful when students have an interrupted period of time with us. They don't spend the entire time. We're highly successful when we work with students who are youngest first, and where we struggle the most is when students join us for the first time as non-language speakers as there are older students. And that range, for example, of challenges is in every one of our schools.
Tamar, this might sound like a flip question, but I'm serious about it. What do you do versus what the superintendent does? Where does the board member's responsibility end and the superintendent's responsibility begin?
The school board, and there are 7 board members for all of LAUSD, we set the policy for the district. And we do a few other things. We approve the budget. There's certain purchases, large purchases the board has to approve, and we hire the superintendent. Really everything else about running the district on a day-to-day basis is made by the superintendent and his staff. So we hire him to run the district, and the board sets policy that guides what the superintendent and his staff do.
Now, this sounds like another basic question, but I want to define terms because sometimes the lingo is assumed and it can be confusing, and I get confused. Superintendent Deasy, you referred to Title I. What does Title anything mean? When we talk about titles, what does that actually mean?
Those are the allocations of federally funded programs that come to us through titles in various pieces of legislation. And Title I is probably the most well-known, and it is one of the oldest in the country, and those are programs that are funded by direct allocations from Washington, D.C. that come to Sacramento and go to each district. And Title I is the program that seeks to support students to build a level playing field who live in circumstances of poverty. And the way it works in California is the census of your county, in other words, the percentage of individuals in a county who live in poverty determine the amount of money that comes. And then that money comes to Sacramento, and Sacramento takes off a piece of it from the top to run the state's program. And then you get an allocation, based on how poor or how not poor your county is, and we're a school in the county. And then the money is distributed by the number of students who are eligible for a free and or reduced lunch program. The number of students, it's a great question because a commonly misunderstood point is the number of students in the school system who are eligible for free and reduced lunch does not generate the amount of money. What generates the amount of money is your census in your community, your county. What the number in the school does is determines the threshold about how you send the money to the schools, not how much there is to give. How much to give is not in our control, and it has been going down. There are cuts at the federal level, and poverties move up and down, but we're experiencing reductions, and then of course you experience the reductions for when Sacramento takes its piece out of it. And so what the federal guideline is, it's designed to be not a per pupil allocation on poverty, it's designed to be a density. So the greater the number of students who live in circumstances of poverty, that is where the guideline is you're supposed to send that money. And then of course if you take the money, you do the programs that go with the money.
Okay, this next question.
I should say, and then there are other ones. So there's some that deal with gender equity, and there's some that deal with language.
That would be Title IX.
For example. And then there's some deal with language, some deal with professional development for teachers, some deal with young student development for career. Those are other school safety. They generally call the title programs.
I'd like to get both of you to respond to this, because let's go to Title I now. One of the controversies, or at least perceptions, and if it's an incorrect perception, you obviously will correct us, is that schools from upper middle class or middle class neighborhoods that have a lower percentage of Title I eligible students are being penalized for their success in life, if you will, by having funds taken from them and redistributed to other schools. Is that a fair evaluation? And if so, what can we do about it?
So I don't think, my perception is I don't think it has anything to do with people being penalized for their life circumstances. What the guideline for the formula for the federal government is that they want the greatest majority, and we take the money, so we have to go by the guideline. The greatest majority of that money needs to go to schools with the greatest density, the greatest number of students who are eligible for free and reduced lunch. And so at a threshold where there are students there who individually live in circumstances of poverty, but there are fewer than other schools, then that school does not get that funding. That is a federal guideline on that. And they ask it to be, the federal guideline optimal is 75%. We in LA do not do that. We have been as low as 40, and as funds have gone down, there's been fewer funds to go out, and so we've recently recommended it to be at 50% from 45%. Overall, the issue that is so difficult is if we were living in a normal state that funded its schools before we decided not to fund public education since 1978, and we were still hovering at 48th out of 50th in the nation, and we were having normal increases, the pain of this would not be felt. But schools are living in such extreme peril around such minimal funding that every bit helps. The problem with this bit is it's not our bit to decide on the formula. Ours is the local general fund, and that the board makes its decisions on how it goes, and it funds things, and I'll give the opposite in my opinion. It funds, for example, programs for highly gifted students. Should a school be in peril because it doesn't have a large number of highly gifted students? It's not their fault, just like it's not the fault of a school who doesn't have a large number of poor students. The same concept applies. Where there is a great density of those, we provide those services.
Smart, same question, Title I.
I'm going to disagree with the superintendent with regard to most of what he said, with the exception of the fact that California is severely underfunding education. This district made a decision to set the threshold. There's two issues here. One is a procedural one, and that is the board, my colleagues on the board, acting on a recommendation from the superintendent and staff, did decide to move the threshold up
to 50% for next year. No warning to the schools, no input from the schools, no input from the parents or the teachers, and basically just cut those schools off. 23 schools just got cut off for next year. Hundreds of thousands of dollars they were counting on they're not going to get. This was the only tactic to balance the, this part of our budget that was considered. There are several other ways that could have been considered that would have allowed these schools kind of a phase out over a year or something like that. Weren't even considered. I consider it grossly unfair. I was the only vote against it. But I think that the kind of bigger issue on this, the federal law says on Title I is that we have to fully fund those schools with the highest concentration of students living in poverty, and those are fully fund the schools where 75% or more of the students live in circumstances of poverty. We have no idea what fully fund those schools mean, because the schools get money, they spend it on various Title I programs, on personnel, and we have never looked at how the schools are spending the money to figure out if they're getting the best bang for their buck. We don't know what programs, what personnel are really helping those students, and until we figure that out, we don't know what fully fund means. There could be 3 or 4 programs that work better than everything else, and we could consider that fully funded and offer those programs to schools down to 35%. But we haven't done that, and I think that that's really that we've abdicated our responsibility to really delve a little deeper into how our Title I dollars are spent.
Let's talk about accountability if we can, because I think it cuts to so many issues, and it's a broad topic, and you can take it wherever you want to go with this. But we know that the dreaded word parcel tax was floated out. Probably more than 1 or 2 people here probably want to talk about that. And again, the perception is that the taxpayers of the city of Los Angeles have been exceptionally generous to LAUSD, voting yes on bond after bond after bond after bond, construction after construction. The enrollment has gone down. People have voted with their feet and they've taken their kids out of the system. And yet, the hat is being passed again, and people want to know who's ever actually held accountable when a $95 million payroll system, computer system, becomes a $295 million. For these previous mistakes before someone comes back and says we need more.
So I'm going to say a couple of things about your comment. Let me start, first of all, with who's accountable. I and the administration are accountable. I am fully cognizant of that responsibility and more than pleased to take that responsibility. It's difficult to be accountable for something I didn't do or wasn't here for. So glad to disagree with my board member entirely on Title I. But a board makes that decision in its piece, and I'm accountable for the results for that. Your payroll question, what I'm accountable for is to make sure that we've extracted every single conceivable efficiency out of the system. That's why we're moving to a paperless payroll. That's my responsibility. Why should we spend $1 million a year to print a stub that an employee can print themselves if they wish to do so or have direct deposit? So I'm very much aware of what happened in the past around that piece. But I do know that at this point forward, at least on the payroll piece, not only has that been corrected, but we're taking the system and making it even more efficient around that.
Yeah.
Second, to your
forgive me, just
Sure.
I want to clarify the question, because I don't believe that you should be held accountable for stuff that you weren't here for. But as we go through this age of austerity, and we're all having to do more with less, there's a lot of scar tissue from previous blunders where there was no palliative, there was no correction. And to me, in a vox populi sense, I hear this all the time from people. They're so frustrated that there has been no accountability for previous mistakes, and they want to know why they should trust another hat passing.
Absolutely.
So a couple of things. One would be when you talk about the notion of previous mistakes, but it helps much more to be quite specific about it. You mentioned one. And so
Yeah,
we
yeah,
can,
as an example.
yeah, as an example. And so if you want to raise the other ones, I'd be glad to respond to those as well. It's really simple. Do our youth deserve the same education that we got? Do they have the right to go to school? We're in an age of austerity. No one told them that. They're the ones who are literally going to either be the future or not the future for us in this room. They are simply going to be the people who are going to take care of me and everybody else in here. And I think fundamentally, a society that says do more with less for someone who has no voice is not exactly what Adams was encouraging or thinking about when you decided to open the meeting with that quote. Second of all is, we made an obligation to them. We didn't say come to school and we'll do our best. We said come to school and we guarantee this will happen. Now, if you want to talk about population declining, the overwhelming majority of the population decline in the LAUSD schools is because people are not having babies. It's not because they're not voting with their feet. Simply take a look at the last 8 years in the census. Less kids born, less show up 5 years later. And inside of that, we have a situation of both public schools and public charter schools, and that is choice. And this is an administration that believes that parents get the right to high-quality public choice. And if they believe that the best thing for their son or daughter is this public school or that public school, in this state that happens to be the law, you honor that. And we intend to honor that, and our responsibility is quality control. We rate every single school, and we intervene in the lowest performing schools and either close them down or we have reconstituted them, and that is exactly what we continue to plan to do. In schools that are doing well, it has been to do our absolute level best to provide them the resources in a time where we don't make money. This is, California is a state where the school district does not actually determine what it needs for money, it spends what it's given. And we'll talk about what's happened since 1978 in this state around public education and the unintended consequences on the education side of the house for that in a moment. But the responsibility for what we're doing, you have at the point in terms of an educational system, one where we have some of the highest performing schools in the state of California and Los Angeles Unified. Highest performing in the state. I don't believe they should be funded any less than they are now. And that's what's going to happen. Given the governor's budget. We have schools in this amazing number of schools where we not only deal with students who are learning English, we teach a phenomenal amount of languages. We have charter schools, and we have pilot schools, and we have teacher-led schools and teacher-developed schools. We have a number of small schools, all showing extraordinary success. And we have many schools where we have not seen the success that either I or anybody else would want at this point. And are very aggressively taking a look at doing that. We've just inked a contract with the teachers union, who most people would say was never going to happen. Okay? Just, UTLA just won't move. Okay, they've moved into a place that is beyond, in my opinion, beyond comprehension. Where teachers at a school can say, these are the clauses in the contract we no longer think are working here. And we can waive those, and nobody can say we can't waive those. I'm going to hold you accountable. But a school can have the level of autonomy to move forward. In a district that has got that movement, it's beyond my belief why anybody would want to choke them off. And I'm a taxpayer, I am a dad. And the last thing I need with college tuitions is to pay more money when I actually believe that you could have restructured the income tax in the state of California and split the roles so that Disneyland is paying the exact same type of tax that I pay on my house. But we've chosen not to do that piece. Given the tools we have, I have to go to the community and say, I cannot physically look at a kindergartner and say, I'm sorry, you're screwed. There's nothing I can do about it. You are not going to have the chance that your older brother got. I believe a community won't do that. I believe they won't.
All right. How important, and we're going to, I promise we're going to get to your questions right after this. We'll start going audience questions, get as many as we can in. Superintendent Deasy just talked about the new contract with UTLA, and the question that we always had about A.J. Duffy, the former union head, is whether he got his clothes at Hollywood Park or Santa Anita. But other than that, there is a new contract. And how important is that contract going forward to bring autonomy?
So it's not the union president's clothes I care about, it's his signature on the contract. So I think the issue of this is we've moved from a place where, so I'm gonna give my opinion, sure. We were asking teachers and principals to do extraordinary work. And I would argue we put one or both hands tied behind their back in terms of doing this work. So we have charters who had huge degrees of institutional and personal autonomy in schools to deliver the same results. And we have public schools who have to do the exact same thing where those were really prohibited. And what we said to the union was, this cannot stand. If we're going to ask schools to do and deliver on their results, every school's got a performance index, every school's got a set of targets they have to meet. This is new. And people are uncomfortable with it. Yeah, people are really uncomfortable when they live in their cars too. Those are our students who come to our schools, all right? So we want to deliver at a very high level. So the accountability piece is not what I worry about. It was the tools to do the job. And so what we said was, if a faculty believes that it should reconstruct its day, it should choose who comes to its schools, it should choose hiring, absence, seniority. If it wants a mutual agreement clause where people choose to come and contracts are done year over year, not forever at the school. If it wants to do home visits, if it wants to have a longer period of time, adjust its class sizes, or trade its positions in its school, why shouldn't they be allowed to do that? And what we finally have come to is schools can individually, because I do not believe the central office should be telling them how to do that. We hold the standards and we hold the outcomes. The mean teachers are the best equipped in the system to understand the needs of students in that district, in that local area. We need to get out of their way and let them do that. And that's what the contract has done. There's a great amount of nervousness on both sides over that because they've never ventured down this territory before. We have. We allowed a few to do this, but we capped it. I can travel from this school to places that are stunning examples of teachers and principals leading improvements like I have never seen before. Why should it only be capped? And we lifted all those caps.
Tomorrow, last question for me, and then we'll go to audience questions. What do we, as parents, have to do better?
Let me start by talking about morning drop-off. And my son's principal is here and she's laughing. It really, what it really comes down to is caring, getting involved. I mean, we have too many parents who drop off the kid at the gate at 8 o'clock in the morning and say, he's your problem for the next 5 or 6 hours, and turn around and leave. Don't know what goes on in the classroom, don't particularly care when the teacher comes back and says, we're having a problem with this, we need your help to work with her on that. We're not getting that kind of engagement. The number of parents who don't show up on back to school nights or really are engaged in anything that's going on, don't come to a PTSA meeting, don't really know or particularly care what goes on at school. That's a really tough road for that teacher because the teacher needs the support and the encouragement and the backup from that parent at home to make sure that homework is done. And I think this is one of the things that's so frustrating to so many teachers is as we're going to start holding teachers more and more responsible for the outcomes of their student, if the parents don't care, how can you hold that teacher responsible for what's going on? Struggling with is how to engage those parents. We're trying so many things to engage them, but then we have students, as the superintendent mentioned, who are living in foster homes and living in group homes and have guardians that aren't really involved. So we do have challenges, but for those students who have parents we need who are there, who they're living with, we have to figure out a better way to engage these parents and make them partners in what's going on at school.
Why don't we get into as many audience questions as we can. I know there's some index cards. If we can get somebody to collect those, I'll fold those in. And we're going to take questions. We should put a microphone over here. So if you want to ask questions, you can queue up over here. I have one question from jazz musician friends. You know, there's been an epidemic of tuba robberies from schools. And one of my jazz musician friends asked if we could get them all stolen. But that's a whole different problem. Okay, we got obviously a lot of passion, which is wonderful. And let me get, we got a mic over here, please? Okay. Let me bring this one over here. Let me bring this microphone over, and I'll give it to Tamar and Secretary Deasy, and they can pass this back and forth for answers.
Okay, let me just make sure the rules are clear. We have a lot of people who want to ask questions here. We have some questions on index cards from people who can't get up here. I'm going to be holding the microphone. You're here to ask a question. If you're making a statement, I'm going to move you on. We want to have questions, and we want to get as many people talking and asking questions as well. If you're back there and somebody's already asked your question a couple of times, maybe make way for somebody whose question who hasn't been asked yet. So anyway, we will start with you, sir. I will be holding the microphone.
I think everybody should take a 1-minute question, then we'll get all through. Agree? Okay, my question is directed to both of you. I'm talking about in defense of teachers. Nobody speak up for teachers. So, in Korea and Japan, why students do well? Because the parents are involved with the children.
And your question is?
Then why the school district emphasize the test score? If they don't do well, teachers are bad. Why don't you tell parents, get involved and do it? You know?
We are trying to engage parents, but some of them just don't care or are too busy or feel disengaged or don't speak the language or whatever the issue is. We are trying to engage parents.
They're working.
We are trying to engage parents. It's a challenge, and it's something that we can do better. And we are trying. Superintendent hired someone whose job it is really to engage parents, but it's an uphill climb, but we're trying.
Thank you.
Yes, students are already feeling pressure on campus from cutbacks and larger class sizes. My question is, even though the parcel tax is very important, can we get a guarantee from you that the children will not be used as a vehicle to help push that parcel tax?
So, so the answer is I will have no part of any campaign that actually uses students in that way. I'm trying to find the lady who's asking the question. Oh, right here. Because it's just absolutely the wrong way to do that. What will affect students, everyone should know about that. That's clear. But having them in the middle of that or being a pawn in that thing is just totally inappropriate.
Superintendent Deasy, I applaud your mission statement of everyone graduated from college and having careers that will be able to support their families. But right now, it's my understanding that LAUSD has a graduation rate of less than 50%, and the Sherman Oaks Center for Enriched Studies has a graduation rate of 99%, yes, yet $500,000 was just cut, almost $500,000 from our next year's budget. That is how we fund over 14 of our teachers and our nurse, among other programs. So how do you propose that we make up this September for this tremendous loss?
So the graduation rate is 56% in LAUSD, 4-year cohort graduation rate. And that has moved up every year steadily around that, and that is fantastic. Your school is another example of the many schools that have a very high graduation rate. Your cut was from Title I. We just actually talked about the Title I piece. And it has to do with the percentage of youth in poverty at the school. And I don't mean to be more upsetting than necessary, but I'm a straight up person. That's the tip of the iceberg compared to what is coming if we deal with Brown's budget in the state of California. So I don't have an answer as to how you'll make it up. I have an answer that I'm proposing to the board is how to avoid a catastrophe.
We do have 1,100 students that do meet the poverty level. So out of our 2,100 students at the school, to make up for $500,000 is, you have no proposal of how we're supposed to do that?
This is not, I mean, we can go through it. The answer is it's not our funding, just like when your school got to a certain level of percentage. There was no proposal to you as to how to spend it.
And speaking from the board, I am hoping that soon we will have another proposal to see if we can look at the funding for next year. I don't know if there's support on the board to do that, but at least trying to make the cut as manageable as possible for schools like yours that really got impacted.
All 23.
But they're like almost
Yes,
50%.
I'm a teacher, and my question is, I have a lot of questions, I could talk up here all day, but I have one specific question for the board member. You hired Mr. Deasy, and he recommended, according to the, regarding the early school start. We hear that it's going to cost from $1 million to $4 million to start school 3 weeks early. Even if it costs $500,000, it's going to cost.
It doesn't cost.
Okay, but parents have never had a chance to vote on that, and if there's even one teacher out of work and you're spending money to start the school in this economic environment 3 weeks early, I don't know how you can justify that. There is no support for that.
There is support for it, and I can ask the teachers and the staff and the principal at this school, which is one of the schools that piloted it. Their teachers, their staff, and their students love the idea that the first semester is finished before the winter break. They get more time in to study for AP exams. It has done wonders at the schools that have piloted it, and that's why we're doing it district-wide.
We're going to take a few questions from the index cards next. Doug, you want to come up here and ask them?
There's a lot of questions.
And then we'll get back to the line.
There's a lot of folks who want to ask questions about both preschool, early education, as well as continuing education. Obviously, a great deal of passion. As we can see, there's a great deal of passion here. And may I just interject for a second? The passion is wonderful. The passion I repeat myself. The success of LAUSD, all of its schools, is critical to the success of this country. This is not just hyperbole and rhetoric, it is the future of the nation. So while we may disagree on specific policies and specific results and approaches, the fact that we're in this room together with the leadership of the LAUSD is profoundly important, because there's a lot of people who just don't care or they've given up, and that's a tragedy.
And your question is?
The question is, the early education and the adult and continuing education programs that are so important and passionate for so many people in this room, how do we protect those and preserve that in an age of austerity?
So a couple of things on this. One is that every program is important. School nurses are important. School psychologists are important. Police are important. Class sizes not being at 40 to 1 are important. Early childhood is important. Adult ed, and we should make really clear, adult ed is not for just adults. It is for young youth. So it's 18, 19, 20, 21, 22 years.
Why are you really cutting it?
16, 19. All of the programs, I don't get in between one has more value than the other. The entirety of the issue, and I'm sure people are reading the newspaper, what is going to be taken away from public education in next year's budget will not fund them. And so you can't just run a deficit. So in the adult ed program, let's use that as an example, you get X amount of money to run the program. LAUSD, for completely smart and wise decisions, has chosen to run more than it gets the money for. It cannot run up money it doesn't get any longer. So we've reached the point where there is no funding for that piece. So the program will need to be reduced to only the funds you're allowed to run the program. Class size is a perfect example. I could go through. Transportation, I think, is the easiest for people. The state has decided to say, we don't fund buses anymore. If you want to do a bus, do it yourself, cut something inside if you want to run a bus. I mean, that's the decision. In his budget, is not a mid-year cut any longer, it's forever. They have to take themselves out of the transportation side of education in California. What can you do? First of all, please don't lose the passion. It's not just tonight, and it's not just the budget decision. What you can do is you can support an initiative that gives us temporary funding to not lose the program, and we have got to figure out how we're going to support a state initiative that does not make things catastrophically worse. I think people should be very clear what the governor's budget is saying. If you vote, well, if he gets on the ballot, if you vote no in its present form, we experience hundreds of millions of dollars of cuts, new cuts. And people are saying, well, how could that be? Because the money won't come to us to run the current program, and because that money comes out of the budget, the Prop 98 formula that funds the rest of us goes down across the state. So saying no triggers two sets of cuts. If you say yes, it's just not that bad, but let's be very clear. It's not a lot better. So by voting yes, you avoid the catastrophic cuts, but you do not give the district new money. What you do is you prevent worse cuts, and according to the governor's proposal, you pay back an IOU. You're not getting new cash on the table. Hence the fact is, you use the term hand in hand. That's exactly right. If we want any of this to stay together, we will need to find a way for a period of time. It is a defined period of time. And I would recommend to the board that what we do is something along the line of is saying, can the community help us in the only means we know what is allowed to us, which is a parcel tax, for a 5-year period. And I will say to the board, they can do what they want, they should suspend taking down the new bonds in front of us so that you never get a tax increase. You already voted for that one. Suspend that for the period of time we need to run the schools. I'm trying to figure out how we improve the school's physical condition and then have nobody to actually work inside of them. And so it would seem to me that that would be the logical way. And in essence, we would have asked people to have, which you already voted once to do that, is not to double that. And that's what I would be proposing. And then we have to make a giant assumption at the end of these period of time, the economy will be healthy. Past history says it will. The programs will be saved. And we will be able to then have those IOUs, which total almost $1 billion for LAUSD alone. So you see what the budgets give you. You don't get that money. That's the formula. It's then not given to you, and it's owed to you one day down the road. The amount that's owed to LAU, the state of California, is a little over $9 billion at this point in public education. And by our formula, we're about $900 million of that. When that comes back, it'll be a healthier place.
So obviously, the challenges for early education and continuing education, adult education, is grim based on the financial reality that we're staring in the face right now.
Sir,
Everything's
grim. Yeah, this is not
Get on the mic.
about nurses, this is about buses, this is about cafeterias, this is about the ability to have class size where it is now. Those are two very small portions of a giant budget, for which funding is no longer coming. I mean, what has been missed in the governor's budget proposal is the largest public policy change in education in California since Prop 13. Everybody's focused on the cuts. The other thing that he has proposed is that money used to come to the board in 35 or 40 categories. Hence, they're called categorical. You spend this amount when I give it to you to keep kindergarten class size small. You spend this amount to do a second science course in high school. He has proposed to eliminate all of that and say, do what you want with the money. What little you get of it. That is a major policy shift. And we're going to need to deal with that.
All right, well, let's go back to the line, which is getting longer.
I want to make sure they're listening. Hi. How do you plan on attracting families back to LAUSD when you continue to make inequitable cuts to schools that are thriving and succeeding, such as SOCIs? Are you going to stop the wasteful abundance of money going into the KIA type schools? I know there are formulas and federal monies and what have you, but there is I know, wasteful abundance going on in some of the schools that have classrooms locked up with technology that's not being used because they have a use it or lose it kind of policy, like business. Is there a way to eventually transition these funds more equitably?
So KIA, for people in the room who might not be familiar, KIA is a program in the state of California where funds are given not to us but directly to schools. Has nothing to do actually with the board. A school is eligible, they apply, and then they, get it. And KIA is funding which helps further reduce class size, provide some technology. That is entirely a state-run program. I don't even know if it's going to be around anymore. I can't move a penny of it. That is a complete issue from the State Board of Schools. The teachers union in the state of California lobbied very hard to create KIA, and they lobbied very hard to keep KIA. It's got actually nothing to do with LAUSD whatsoever around that issue.
However,
So, Tamara, did you want to?
You know, I think that the question though is the one that I've been struggling with, and it was the reason I ran for the board and everything, which is how do you attract and keep middle class families in this district if they're looking at going to schools in their neighborhood that are so chronically underfunded? Because if the state cuts and cuts and cuts and cuts, the only money that's really left is some of these specialty programs, state programs, and federal programs, and those aren't getting to any of our middle class schools. And they're really hanging on with whatever their parents can raise, which is anywhere from $20,000 to $900,000, depending on what neighborhood it is. And you can't run a school like that depending on donations of kind strangers who are going to give you Xerox paper. And I mean, and I think that that's really what it comes down to. If the middle class families leave this district en masse, the ones who are still here, what are we going to be facing? And this really goes back to how Doug started out this. This has to do with public education. This is something that really brings the community together, solidifies what our values are. And that's what's at stake here. And I think that's why sometimes I frustrate you and some of my colleagues on the board when I keep talking about these schools that no one else is focusing on, because these kids deserve lead-free water and play yards and computer equipment just like anyone else who goes to school in LAUSD.
Right to that point about the kindness of strangers with copy paper, we have a question about outside of government funding. What efforts are being made by LAUSD through the private sector? I know you worked with the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, Superintendent Deasy. Well, what about getting the LA and California private sector involved in a direct way for LAUSD?
So we just launched and formed the LA Fund for Public Education, and there are some amazing people who have chosen to be on that board, which I am deeply grateful for. Our goal is $250 million in the first wave, and it is to fund a number of the types of things that you are all talking about, and then after that is to fund another $250 million. We're the only large urban district of the top 5 in the country that does not have such a fund. It was one of the things that we chose to do it, and so obviously the board has been formed. Megan Chernin very gratefully has agreed to chair the board, and it is whom you would expect. It's that combination of high wealth individual and Hollywood, those are the two, the banking and the Hollywood sector, the two largest pieces. And people, I have to say, what has pleasantly shocked me the most is they just didn't know that these kind of issues were out there. And so when asked, have been very, very generous.
And right now, a lot of you know, the Wasserman Foundation gave us money, matching grant, the Donors Choose cards that I know a lot of you got. A lot of teachers have gone online and put up projects that they want funded. Parents should have all gotten cards. If you haven't, let us know. Starbucks is now involved. Some of the Starbucks are choosing to give out cards, $10 cards where you can go online and make a donation. Again, this is all private money that's coming to us. I'm just going to make my pitch right now and annoy the superintendent a little, that
many of the foundations and many of the grants and a lot of the parents and teachers in this room write for have said, oh no, you're not the kind of school that we're going to give money to. And a lot of the large corporations only want to give money to really poor schools. And a lot of the other schools that also need an opportunity because they're not getting any other dollars, they're shut out of a lot of those grants and a lot of the foundation money. So I want to make sure that we're cognizant of that fact, and kind of every school in this district really gets an opportunity to participate.
I agree with you. I'm the person who frequently has to go and ask people, and it's very difficult to listen to people, because the reality is people can do what they want with their own money. And if they want to give, they will, and if they don't, they won't. And we try to compel them around this issue, and they have their, what they call funding priorities. And many times they will tell me, no, we're not interested in giving so you can keep your class size down, or giving so that you can have a science teacher. They don't want to do those types of things. And that is, what they will say is, that's your state responsibility. Our responsibility is to give where a state won't do that. And then I reminded them, do you know what California is? And they say that, they'll say that they're really disappointed in that. It doesn't help them.
Hi, my name's Christine Kim, and I'm a parent at Milliken Middle School. And I'm here because I'm very distressed about the decision to cut $600,000 from our budget, which is basically going to shutter our library. It's going to cut our nurse staff down to 1 day a week. We're going to cut two teachers from our staff, which means that our average class size is about 43, 46, something like that. My friend Kathleen Wilhoit is here. Her daughter had to sit on a radiator when she...
Is there a question?
I think it's a little disingenuous to talk about how this is just a federal Title I program, because the reality is that this money is being used to fund the bare bones budget of these schools. And what I want to say to you is...
do you have a question?
Yes, I do. We are the taxpayer shareholders in the schools, and you work for us. And have you looked at reallocating the money in the administrative budget, which is completely bloated? There are 18 lawyers on the central office budget. They make a salary of $3.6 million a year, not including benefits. There are 150 positions in the central office in Beaudry that make over $159,000 a year. You take $50,000. You would be bankrupt and out of a job.
While they're human beings too, we've dismissed 56% of the people who live at Beaudry and used to work there. So they are out of employment in the last 2 years. By the way, they're parents also, and they're now unemployed. Second thing, in terms of Beaudry, is I propose that next year we're going to cut the 8 local districts to 4. That's so I appreciate the clapping. Those will be people who won't have food on their table either. Okay, those are
Vote the bums out!
also work just like you. And so I think it's important that we make decisions to cut. They're humans at the same time. So I appreciate the comment. That's what we've done around this. And so, I don't know about bloated. I don't see people at Beaudry. They're not there any longer.
Yeah, that's the tip of the iceberg.
Can I
Okay,
just respond to piece of this? The board has also, working with the superintendent, kind of looked office by office. We've eliminated complete offices. We've really gone through that. But let's just take the the legal staff, and I'm not just saying this because I'm a lawyer, but the issue is we've priced it. If we get sued every single day, if we went out of house and had to hire a lawyer to represent us every single time, we would end up spending so much more than if we have attorneys in-house to guide us. I mean, that's just one of those things that I know a lot of people can rally around, but we've done the cost-benefit analysis for a lot of these positions. If we went out of house for legal staff and risk management and a lot of those, and it's just not cost efficient for us to do that. It'll cost us more. So I want folks to know that we have looked at almost every single position. There are a few that I think still could be eliminated. I'll give you names later. But you know, we have gone through a lot of this in the budget over the last 2 years.
Hi, my name is Michael Gardner. I'm a welding student at North Valley Occupational Center with occupational education as well. What are we supposed to do if all these shop classes and everything are being cut from high school? We're not being trained to do skilled labor.
Yeah, I mean, our goal what we're trying to do is to save those programs by getting people to understand that they need to support the state initiative and the local initiative.
And what the military has 40% force reduction. People are coming back. They're not going to be able to do what they're trained to do. They need to retrain. If these programs that they can afford are out of business or we can't get to them anymore, what are we supposed to do?
I think that I'm incredibly sensitive to that, having a deep part of my family in the military. It is not, however, as much as I appreciate this, that is not the function of the public school system. So if the government would like to give us the money to retrain military, I'm glad to do that. But I can't do that at the expense of having 41 kindergartners in a classroom. That was the primary purpose, was to have gotten kindergartners to go to first grade. There were other programs. This is happening, and you are right on the money, sir. There are a lot of other programs which are collapsing and then saying, okay, you can get at your local school. But there's no revenue coming for those programs. And so I'm really struggling around how we can